Hello everyone, I'm Shem and this is my cat. Her name is Elodie and she is literally the coolest guy ever. But she hasn't learned how to fly yet and keeps her paws firmly on the ground. This is Robert, the very unofficial name of the cat from the 2022 Game of the Year contender Stray. I like Robert. He's brave and loyal and friendly, and he can fly. When I first saw this in a speedrun, I knew I had to learn it, and so I practiced and grinded until I get to the point where it was all second nature to me. I did my runs on the PC version of the game, specifically on patch 2. I'll talk about why very soon, but all that's important right now is it's the fastest way to play overall. In general, Stray is a pretty simple game. We can run around of course, but jumping is limited, only being possible when you get close to a ledge. It'll give you a prompt to jump, and by pressing the spacebar, you can jump. Oh, and of course we have the Meow button, one of the greatest things to ever grace gaming. What a game. While Stray achieved the Jeff Keighley seal of approval, he never did any speedruns, so can this silly cat game hold up and get the even more prestigious Shemcat thumbs up? Stray is comprised of various chapters, the first of which being Inside the Wall, and we start off by playing with our kitty friends. This is very cute, but also pretty slow, as there's no way to speed up these animations at all, and so all we can do to optimize this is just run between them as fast as we can. After we've played with all three cats, it's time for bed, but we're going to be a rebel here and avoid this, since it will also trigger an unskippable cutscene, and we don't really want that. After pressing the button to go to sleep, Robert has to navigate towards the bed before going to sleep and starting the cutscene. But what if he can't actually get there? If we're sitting at certain points on the slope, Robert will just walk around and around in circles until the screen fully fades to black, since he's just too confused. In this scenario, the cutscene won't actually play, and instead we are loaded in at the starting position, rather than down in the wilderness. Whilst that's the issue of the cutscene taken care of, we now need to get down, and since that isn't possible normally in this scenario, we need to get creative. By just walking into the pipe at the correct angle, we can clip into it and start walking around. And then, by getting as far in as we can change our angle and start to run, pushing us out of the pipe and falling down. This glitch is an example of why we play on patch 2. The developers removed it from later versions of the game due to the obvious game-breaking nature of it. We're now on the same level as our kitty friends, but still out of bounds, so our final step is getting back in bounds, which is done by running at a specific line in the wall and turning around just before running into it. As we turn around, we'll do a little hop through the wall, landing us back in bounds. The next few minutes of the segment is pretty straightforward, and by that I mean we literally just hold straight ahead, jumping up and down as necessary. What's important here is just holding the tightest lines and making sure to hit the nice jump prompts so as not to waste time. After getting to the end of the chapter, we are shown the cutscene of Robert falling, looking at the camera and saying, "Well, looks like I'm now a stray," as we're brought to the dead city. After watching a few more cutscenes setting the scene for this new area we found ourselves in, we are given back full control, allowing for us to demonstrate some more of the movement, with a focus on moving as tightly as possible and jumping as soon as we are given the prompt to, alongside some small things like jumping onto the pipe as late as possible, since you move slower when walking along it. After blocking the fan, we are then brought to this spot with a bunch of paint cans, and by interacting with them, we can push them off of ledges. To progress the story, we need to interact with this can twice to knock it off, but if, before then, we position ourselves in between the can and the ledge, we can interact with it a third time, just before it begins to fall, with the game moving Robert closer to the can's position, so that after the animation is finished, he falls like a lead balloon into the house below. Unfortunately, in my personal best, my positioning wasn't quite there, and so I had to go down the normal way, which thankfully only loses a couple of seconds. This is a Zerk. They're the main enemies we have to deal with in the first half of the game, mainly in the form of chase sequences, and in the speedrun, these are a joke. This is thanks to the fact that the speedrun moderators allow a macro for mashing the Meow button, which is our means of defense if a Zerk lands on us. Whilst these are usually banned in a speedrun, the different hardware that people use to play PC games means that the speed of their mashing will partially depend on this, and so this was implemented just to even the playing field. The same reason why many PC games also have their load times removed. Therefore in this first chase, rather than running through as fast as possible, manically scrolling the scroll wheel in case a Zerk lands on us, we just hold down a button which does the same thing, just without the hardware dependency. After outrunning the Zerks, we then finish the chapter with some more straightforward movement before heading into the flat. After mashing keys on the keyboard, or alternatively just standing on the same one, we open up a door to the side, and in order to open up yet another secret door, we need to move 4 plugs into some sockets in the wall. The first is on top of the shelf, which we access by first jumping onto a stool. The second is plugged into something else on a desk in the middle of the room, with the third also originally being plugged into another device. For the final plug, we have to pull a lever at the start of the room, giving us a path to the final plug that we can take and put into the final socket, giving us a way into the secret room. It is also worth mentioning that whilst this all seems really simple, doing this optimally is actually really hard, as the positioning to plug them in is pretty precise, and if you're even just slightly off, you'll drop the plug and then you've got to pick it up again and reposition yourself before being able to put it in again. During the cutscene, we actually still have full control over Robert, so we can get a head start on retrieving B12 from the top of the shelf, where we bring him over to the computer setup to make the little drone conscious. After his introductory cutscene, B12 takes us around the room, showing us all the new things he can do, picking up items like the key and viewing them in your inventory, using the light and interacting with things such as this panel, which requires a 4-digit password to unlock. The normal way of doing this is by going into one of the side rooms and looking there, where you can see it on the wall. But it is 3748 in every playthrough, so we can just put that in each time. Something else B12 can do is talk to you and give you little hints about where to go next, which you'd think would be irrelevant in the speedrun, but it's actually able to save a lot of time. There's a cutscene of B12 obtaining a memory after we've gotten out of the flat, but by overriding this with the help text box, by asking for help at the perfect time just before the cutscene starts, we don't have to mash through any of the other text boxes, allowing us to just grab the postcard and head into the slums. This is where we learn to fly, by the way. First, we need to meet with the village elder, and actually go into the options and lower our frame rate from 60 to 30 frames per second, which is a prerequisite for our takeoff. In order to fly, we need to get into this house, but the door is closed, and we don't have a good way in right now. By scratching at the door and then quickly stopping, we get placed on the other side, now inside the building and ready to wreak havoc. We run to the top of the stairs, and then reload the save. This trick is very precise, down to the specific coordinate, and so by reloading the save, it's more consistent to hit the spot. After reloading, we jump onto the shelf by the bed, and move Robert very carefully to meet the exact coordinate, also using the neon lights and the writing on the wall to make sure our camera is in the precise spot. If we do this without making any tiny errors in our positioning, we can then jump onto the bed, and if we did all the setup correctly, and time our jump correctly, Robert will begin to fly majestically through the air, clipping through walls like it's nothing. This happens because the game loses the ability to track Robert correctly, meaning the usual rules that would stop him walking on air or clipping through the stairs don't apply, and after Robert is through the stairs, we are in the void. Since the later segments of the game exist far out of bounds in this void, we are able to simply run over there, and once we are in the correct position, we'll set our game back to 60 FPS, fall down, and find ourselves at the entrance of the sewers, skipping multiple chapters and saving around 20 minutes from the speedrun. We are now deep in the sewers, and there are a ton of Zerks to deal with, which we can shake off with our macro, and also the upgraded B12 light, which doubles as a UV beam that can kill any Zerks exposed for too long. This brings us into this unsettling room, with the closed eyes on the wall, and more Zerk eggs that burst open when we run past. In order to set up for another big skip, we run to the right of this room, and then jump along this pipe, and run along so that we can align Robert's foot with a specific piece of rust. By doing all this, we're in the right spot to jump to the very end of the barrel, which leads to us being walked back onto the pipe after zooming in our camera at a very specific spot on the wall. The next step in this trick is to jump back on. When we do this, one of two things will happen, on what feels like basically random chance. Either we'll once again be warped back onto the pipe. If this happens, we need to reload the file, and if we don't already have a massive lead, the run is pretty much dead since the game is now soft locked. However, if we get lucky, Robert will clip just under the surface of the water, where we can move around freely. By running up to the gate, we can squeeze ourselves in, and with some more wiggling, we can barely access a tiny jump prompt, bringing us back in bounds. This status is actually pretty similar to the flying of the last chapter, allowing us to run off this ledge and jump onto the other side, taking this path so that we avoid entering the cutscene. One final chase with the Zerks, with no music this time because we skipped the cutscene, and we can exit the sewers and instead make our way over to the Antvillage. This is the shortest segment in the whole game, starting off with a quick cutscene skip by asking B12 for help just as you pass the trigger for the dialogue starting. Outside of this, there isn't too much to this split other than just running through as fast as we possibly can, so now it's time for the obligatory posture and hydration check. This video is getting pretty long, so you can take a break. I'll be waiting. Midtown is another one of those skips that starts off with a cutscene skip. You know, thinking about it, these cutscene skips are kinda sad. We ask B12 for help saving time, and in turn he is unable to rediscover who he is, and can't reclaim his memories. What a guy. Still within the first minute of this split, we're doing another skip, this time called Hat Skip. By running into the wall and then slowly moving Robert so he's parallel to the vent, we can then turn around, and since his model briefly clips to the side, we have a small window to interact with the post holding it up, bringing us inside the building where we can instantly grab the hard hat. From here we run over to the apartment complex, knock down 2 of 3 security cameras, and meet Clementine, who tells us to meet up with a guy called Blazer. But before we go and do that, we break a 3rd security camera, which lets us acquire the cassette tape. We can use this item in the shop radio, and whilst the clerk is distracted, we steal the high-vis jacket and run out to meet Blazer, who asks us for the hat and jacket which we just stole. This is so that he can break us into the NecoCorp facility, where we need to steal a battery, but before that, a short cutscene plays. A small piece of time save we see mostly in this section is taking out B12 using the torch before doing things like talking to people, thus starting the conversation instantly, rather than waiting a handful of frames for him to come out of your backpack. In the factory, we are introduced to these sentinels, who will target you if you're in their vision cone for too long, and then will start to fire. Any one of these shots killing you instantly. You may think we need to be careful around these guys, but we can kinda just run straight through them, and get behind cover before they're able to do anything. In the room with the battery in it, rather than completing the puzzle by fully lowering the pole to the floor, we can instead use these moving boxes to press down on 2 of the buttons, and press on the 3rd one ourselves. If the barrel is positioned correctly, we can then jump on top of it as the pole is going back up, and in that tiny window, grab the battery and move on. To progress the story, we head back to the apartments, now heavily guarded by sentinels, who, again, we run past, only to find out Kleb isn't there. After a bit of snooping around, we decide the only place to be is at the nightclub, but after getting all the way there, we decide at the last minute that it isn't for us, and we take a swift exit. When we're on the window ledge, the game only wants us going into the nightclub, but if we angle our camera like this, and press forward and left with correct timing, for a split second we can use a jump prompt and get onto one of the pipes surrounding the building. At this point, the game assumes we aren't going to be leaving, unloading a significant portion of the Midtown, and then loading the jail, the next area we visit. By running at this ledge, we'll slide to the right and fall down into the slammer, skipping the final portion of Midtown and the beginning of this chapter. If you think back to your casual playthrough, you'll remember that we're separated from B12 at the start of the jail section. But of course, since we entered through unconventional means, we keep holding on to him. This means we can talk to Clem just after letting her out of her cell, and also after watching the cutscene where we're shown the imposter B12, to get her moving faster, and in the latter example, to get her to open the next door from far away, letting us start the cutscene faster. Since we're entering something else through unconventional means, this is of course also buggy, with the cutscene not playing properly. The next section has a ton of sentinels and moving lasers, making getting through pretty difficult, especially at speed. But by entering this way, if we die at all, the game won't be able to progress, and so a slight slip up may ruin the entire run. We can jump over the top using the light to get past the first set of lasers, and then use a pipe to the side for the second. The sentinel in front of here can be distracted by meowing and then running under, but if not, we gotta hope the power of moving lasers aren't on a horrible cycle and will let us pass without being shot. If we make it past this, we can jump on a nearby lever, which will start a cutscene that we have full control in. From here we can attempt to navigate to the spot B12 is being held, but if not, simply taking a straight path afterwards doesn't lose too much time. Now we can just run back to Clementine, and even if we do get spotted, we're too fast for the sentinels to stop us. Now outside there are still more sentinels to deal with. In order for Clementine to come through the courtyard, we need to lock the sentinel off in a room to the side, which of course involves luring them in here. We get the attention of the first with a meow, and then stay near the edge of the vision cone so it starts approaching us. Since it takes a second for the door to close after pressing the button, we press it before the sentinel is actually in there with us, and then quickly dart out before we get shot. In the next courtyard there are actually 2 sentinels, but in spite of that, these ones are far easier to deal with. Run straight at both sentinels so they aggro you, and run into the room, pressing the button to close the doors as Robert goes past. As it's closing, both of them should be in there, and we can make it out of the other door since Robert is small enough to fit through the gap. This may look very scary, and you can even see the shots coming right at us, but it is genuinely very consistent. The vast majority of my deaths are to the first guy, with the last 2 going perfectly almost every round. We jingle the keys, pull down some levers, and by moving super cleanly we can get a big jump onto the back of the vehicle with Clem, and start the cutscene just a little bit earlier. We're out of the jail now and back in the subway. With Clem leaving us the subway key, all that's left in this split is to use the battery from the Midtown factory to turn the power back on. Our last task is to put the key in, and we take a trip to the control room. Robert gets a bunch of speed running up these first steps if we make him run against the edge, which speeds us up when getting to another one of those boxes, which will follow after you. By bringing it over to the door, we can push it so the box begins to slightly clip through and can jump on it ourselves. By standing to the side, the box will begin to spin around with us still on it. As it's still being clipped through all this, we will also clip through and can just jump off when we're on the other side. One final cutscene skip means we got through the run collecting a grand total of 0% of B12 memories. But that isn't important right now. What's important is getting out of here as fast as possible. We start off by hacking the main terminal and then run across the keyboards in the center of the room so that the black screens become blue. Small errors here are very common because you can also just turn a blue screen off if your movement is slightly off, or if you jump onto the completely wrong terminal. We almost had access to the roof control system, but a triple lock at the last second thwarted our plan. Around the room there are 3 computers which can be hacked into, but only once Robert has scratched at the wires enough. The first is closest to the door and initiates one final cutscene that we can move around in, allowing us to move all the way to the furthest computer in that time. We can push down a plank and access the wires, and B12 can start to hack. One final scratch and hack and the final lock is down, with B12 using the last of his energy to open the roof, in an ending that would make me cry if not for the fact that I was already celebrating my PP. The run isn't quite over yet though. We've still got to watch the final cutscene and then run as fast as we can out of the control room, out of the facility, and out into the outside world that we were in less than 50 minutes ago. This run managed to be a huge 31-second personal best, being the first and only time I've beaten the game in under 50 minutes, and placing me in the top 10 worldwide. So that was the Stray Any% speedrun, and I gotta say, that run had me feline pretty good. I mean, that run was like pretty much perfect. Oh come on, you're acting like what I said was catastrophic? Oh, you gotta be kidding me. I thought my jokes were better than this. Nice! Nice one, man. Sub 50 Stray. Tied UKR? What, am I tied 9th? Chill. I'll take that. Alright, let's see if the cat has anything to say. Yeah.